The Beverly Hillbillies was one of my favorite shows when I was a kid, because in the opening part, the prologue, you see Jed Clampett taking a gun and shooting at the ground, and out comes oil. Actually, the first oil discovered in this country was almost found that easily. Drake's Well in Pennsylvania was perfectly poised to be the first major useful oil discovery in the country. It is still, for its depth, the most productive well in the world. It is 76 feet deep. It was drilled with a cable tool. An anvil was used and dropped by rope onto a weak spot in the earth, and the oil didn't come bubbling out, but it was basically carried up in buckets to the surface. It is a shallow well. It represents the crest of an underground hill, and geologists call those underground hills anticlines. It's at the crest of an anticline, and it was also very, very successful because several things happened in history and in the timing to make this a success for Colonel Drake. There was a need for oil. The timing of this well was around the end of the Civil War. Steam locomotives were very important. The other thing that was very important, steam locomotives needed fuel. The other thing was that there was enough education available to more people in the United States, and people were staying up at night to read. Whale oil was used for the lamps. Whale oil was very expensive. Petroleum was less expensive. Kerosene was made from petroleum, and the product that Colonel Drake found was very, very useful for this new industry. The other thing, transportation. He was close enough to a railroad and therefore could transport his oil to a market to be refined. So there were a confluence of factors that helped the oil industry get started in this country. But the ease of finding the oil and getting it out was important. So not quite Jed Clampett shooting at the ground and having the oil bubble out, but close. Now another very important, because since we're sitting here in Texas, another very important discovery was Spindletop at the turn of the 1900s. That was closer to Jed Clampett than Colonel Drake's activities. That has a very interesting history. There was a German fellow visiting friends in Beaumont. His family were brickmakers, and he was looking for an opportunity to settle in the United States. It wasn't the United States quite as big as it is now. He noticed that in the area around Beaumont, that the soil had a very rich red color and looked a lot like the material that his family used to make bricks back in Germany. So he decided, I'm going to start a brick-making business here because there aren't too many trees around and people need building materials for their homes. Okay, so immediate problem, not too many trees, no lumber. Ooh, how am I going to make bricks in a kiln without fuel? Well, he'd also been paying attention to local stories. And the Indians would talk about a hill. Now remember, this is Beaumont. It's flat as a tabletop, but there's a hill. And around this hill, once in a while, you see these mysterious little mists coming out of the ground. And you see, you know, the sorts of wave-like structures you see over a hot highway in the summertime. Sometimes this stuff would catch fire. And of course, the Indians had a whole series of stories to explain this phenomenon. This German fellow decided maybe there's petroleum there, and got a rig and drilled and drilled and drilled. This was another important part of the history of our business, because ultimately we had a wonderful discovery which spurred a lot of growth in this part of Texas, and it was the kickoff of the oil and gas business. But In Beaumont, with Spindletop, we had the first use of a steam-driven rig. We had the first use of drilling mud, and the drilling mud is not the drilling mud that we use today. It was literally mud. The well was beginning to come in, and by that I mean the well was beginning to, it was out of control. Gas was starting to come up after they had drilled a few hundred feet. And in order to control the mud, or to control the gas from coming out too quickly, they basically got some cows to stir up the mud. They threw water around the rig, and they got some cows to walk around in it and made a lot of mud and just put it down in the hole. And that worked up to a point, and then at a critical point the well blew out. The pressure of the gas that was trying to come up exceeded the weight of the mud, and the well blew out. It blew for about a week. It created a lake 3/4 of a mile across, 800,000 barrels on the ground. That's Jed Clampett.